All right, assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is his last and final messenger. So, we got a good topic for you guys today. For those who don't know, this is in the United States. This February is Black History Month, where in America, we try to focus on the accomplishments of Black Americans and Black history, Black African history in general. And so I figured for Black History Month, let's deal with this video from David. It's an old video from 2018 that he did entitled How Muhammad Ali Was Deceived by Islam. So, when I saw it, I was like, yeah, I never see it. I never saw it before. So I said, let me see, let me see what he's talking about. And I said, well, what a fitting time, wa alaikum salam, what a fitting, video to respond to in Black History Month, because he's trying to go after one of our Black prominent figures here, who was also Muslim, by the way, right? Muhammad Ali was a Muslim. So we're going to address his claims, and let's find out, was Muhammad Ali deceived? People of color, let's see if Muhammad Ali was deceived by Islam or not. Wa alaikum salam. Akil 51, brother, how you doing? Yeah. And this is fun. Like I said, this is an old video. I didn't even know this video is from 2018. This video was from 2018 that he made. So we're gonna address it. I said I couldn't sit by and let him try to insult and degrade our brother Muhammad Ali. So I said, no, we can't let that slide. We're gonna have to address it. We can't let him get away with that. Okay. So what we'll do, let's go ahead and we're gonna listen to David's. We'll take it piece by piece and address the claims that he makes. Okay. So let's see. So here's the video. Here it says how Muhammad Ali was deceived by Islam and why Cassius Clay was his greatest name. All right. So let's get into it. All right. You ready? Let's do it. Oh, and by the way, as a disclaimer, as you know, there is the Fair Use Act, which allows people to use footage or material from other people or other institutions, etc., as long as it is for commentary or educational purposes, refutations, and things of this such. You're allowed to use other people's content if it is used in those manners, and that is of course what we are doing. All right, so let's go ahead and hear what David has to say about the brother Muhammad Ali, and let's address it and refute it. Okay. By the way, don't forget to like the video. Right? Don't forget, you guys, click the like, whether you're watching live or you watch this late at a later date or a later time. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to support the channel. The link, you can utilize the links in the description of this video so we can continue to do the work that we do, and inshallah do more work. As I've said to you many times before, pretty much David Wood, this is like his occupation. If you saw how much he's getting paid on Patreon to continuously put out videos, basically it seems almost like on a daily basis, then you can understand why he can do this full time. And as myself and many of the other brothers support. So whether you're supporting myself or the other brothers, spreading it, sharing it on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever social media you have out there, let's get that done. So again, like the video, please. Don't forget, if you're not subscribed, subscribe to the channel, click that notification bell, and of course, support the channel with any donations that you can to help us so that we can, inshallah, do more videos more frequently, more often. Ameen. All right, with that said, let's get into it. Here we go.
Muhammad Ali was the greatest name for a slave master ever. In 1964, a young boxer named Cassius Clay won an upset victory over Sonny Liston and became heavyweight champion of the world. Later that year, Clay changed his name, first to Cassius X, then to Muhammad Ali. Why did he change his name? Let's let him answer.
Why don't you like to be called Clay anymore?
No, Clay was not my name. Once we follow them.
Now I want to stop it right here, because if you when you go through the rest of the video, you see David is gonna try to do a switch and bait on here, As you see, they're talking about Muhammad Ali's his last name, which is Clay, right? Not his first name. He changed his whole name. But notice they're asking why doesn't he like the name Clay, which is his last name, right? So what David does is ignore the last name and goes by the first name, which is his first and middle name, Cassius Marcellus and Clay. Cassius Marcellus is the name of a prominent man, slave owner from times before, who became an abolitionist, or a person who was he started to think that slavery was wrong, right? So what David does is try to make the argument that, oh well, his name was Cassius Clay, Cassius Marcellus Clay, and he's named after the guy who who was against slavery, who was a slave owner, and then changed his mind and began to speak out against slavery. So he tries to make the argument on that. But notice here they're asking Muhammad about his last name. You see, like for example, let me see if I can help make this sense of you. Like for example, let's say if my non-Muslim name was Jackson, right? And I'm saying, hey man, I don't like the name Jackson. I'm going to change my name Jackson to something because I don't like it. And then somebody tries to make the argument, say, oh well, but Michael Jackson is his name is Jackson. But we're not talking about my first name, right? The first name, Michael Jackson, could be great and wonderful because it's after the famous singer. But the name Jackson, where does that come from? Right? I'm changing the name Jackson because Jackson is not the name of my people. It comes from a former slave master from times before. So regardless of whether Michael Jackson is famous, we're talking about where the last name originates from. The last name is obviously not the name from my family, right? My family originates from the continent, some famous guy. It's where the last name comes from. So we're here, Muhammad Ali is not wrong in saying that he doesn't like the name Clay. Clay is the slave name, and that's correct, because regardless of what this man, the man Cassius Marcellus Clay, changed his name, changed his ideology, he still had slaves at first. And yes, in those days, the slaves did take the names of the master. So whether the original Cassius Marcellus Clay changed his mind to be against slavery, when he was in agreement with slaves, his slaves were still named after the European Caucasian whites named Clay. That family name Clay still does not come from Muhammad Ali's original family, right? That's the name that they took from the Europeans. Correct? So that's what David tries to do when you see the rest of it. He's going to try to make the argument that, well, that was Muhammad Ali's original name, Cassius Marcellus Clay, great name, but that's not the point. Regardless of that fact, he's still the name Clay. Notice again, they're asking him about the last name. The last name is not from Muhammad Ali's original family, right? If Muhammad Ali was to trace his descendants back beyond slavery in America, his family in Africa, their last name is not going to be Clay. So regardless of the weak argument David tries to make, Clay, regardless of the full name, Cassius Marcellus Clay, regardless of him changing his mind, the name is still a slave master's name. The name still originates from the slave master. Whether he changed his mind and freed his slaves later or not, that's still not, to carry on the name of your former oppressor, whether he frees you or not, is still, a problem. Because it's still not your name. You still don't know who you are. Okay? So let's listen to further what Muhammad Ali has to say, and David, and we'll address further.
Believe, understand the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and come into knowledge of ourselves that we want to be called after names of our people, which are names that fit us black people. And Clay was a white man's name. It was a slave name. And
you see? Right there. He's not wrong with that. See, so David's argument is a fallacious argument to try to say, well, the full name Cassius Marcellus Clay, even though he was a man who went against slavery, what Muhammad Ali just said right here, he's not wrong. He's right. He's right. That name Clay is still the slave master's name, right? It's still the name of the Europeans. It's still not his family name, right? It's still not his family name. Let you listen to Malcolm X. Because as you know, Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X were at that time, they were together, right? So listen to how Malcolm X explains and describes the reasoning behind them changing their names. You'll see, listen, let Malcolm explain. Listen to Malcolm X explain it.
Malcolm X.
Is that your legal name?
As far as I'm concerned, it's my legal name.
Have you been to court to establish that
I didn't have to go to court to be called Murphy or Jones or Smith. Excuse me for answering you this way.
That's
if
all right.
a Chinese person were to say his name was Patrick Murphy, you would look at him like he's insane, because Murphy is an Irish name, a European name, or the name that has a Caucasian or white background. And a yellow person, Chinese is a yellow man, and he has nothing to do or no connection whatsoever with the name Murphy. And if it doesn't look proper for a person who is yellow or Chinese to be walking around named Murphy or Jones or Johnson or Bunch or Powell, I think it would be just as improper for a black person or the so-called Negro in this country, as we're taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, to walk around with these names. And therefore he teaches us that during slavery, the same slave master who owned us put his last name on us to denote that we were his property. So that when you see a Negro today who's named Johnson, if you go back in his history, you'll find that he was once, his grandfather or one of his forefathers was owned by a white man who was named Johnson. If his name is Bunch, his grandfather was owned by a white man that was named Bunch.
Would you mind telling me what your father's...
Okay, so as you see from Malcolm explaining that it's irregardless of whether the person's full name, whether you're named by the person's first name and the first name denotes a man who, again, this Cassius Marcellus Clay person, he was a slave owner. He was a slave owner, and he turned, again, he changed his mind later and started to work against slavery. That's great, beautiful, wonderful. But as Malcolm pointed out, having the name Clay, remember, the man asked Muhammad Ali about his name Clay. He's not asking him about Cassius. He's asking him, why don't you like the name Clay, which is the last name? That's why when Muhammad Ali first changed his name, first he changed it to Cassius X. He kept the first name and he dropped the last name because the last name denotes the ownership, right? The last name denotes the ownership. So he changed it from Cassius to Cassius X. You see? And then after Cassius X, he became Muhammad Ali. And the reasoning behind that in the Nation of Islam, their teaching, was that you dropped your last name because the last name was the ownership name. You could have any first name you wanted, but the last name was the name that the slave owner, the slave master had, and that was his family name. And he put it on his slaves, denoting his leadership. The same thing with women, right? When women get married in Western society, they many times take the name of the husband. Right? That's a common thing in Western society, that when a woman gets married to the man, she drops her family last name and takes his last name. And in olden times, that was also the sign of the ownership, that the man that's his woman now. She is his woman, so she takes on his last name. You see? So it's the last name that causes the issue and is the problem here. And Muhammad Ali and both Malcolm X are correct in that, David. So regardless of the first name, it doesn't matter who the first name is after. It's still the family last name that Muhammad is carrying, that Muhammad Ali was carrying. And as Malcolm X said, regardless, those names are not our names. Right? Just like he said, if you met a Chinese guy and a Chinese man say, hey, what's your name? What's your name? And he tells him, my name is Robert Simpson. You're like, huh? It would be amusing. It's like, wait, what? We know that's not Chinese names, right? We know those are not the kind of names that they have from China, right? Their names aren't that, and vice versa. You meet a Caucasian man, a white man, and he comes to you and say, hey, what's your name? And he says his name is Ling Chong Yao. You'll be like, huh? It would be amusing because you know those are not that kind of names that Europeans have, right? You know those are not the kind of names that Europeans have. So both Malcolm and Muhammad Ali are correct, David. But here, we're going to let you hear how David tries to argue that, well, the first name is after this guy. But we've already refuted, but I want you to hear so you can understand, all right?
I'm no longer Clay, I'm no longer a slave, so now I'm Muhammad Ali.
So, Clay was a white man's name,
yes,
but Muhammad and Ali were names for his people.
And I'm going to address that as well. Right? I'm going to address that as well because what he tries to do is, when we watch the rest of the video, is he then tries to make it like, oh, so well, you're going for his people, but you know, those are Arab names. So in other words, to make it like the Arabs are a different people. But I'm going to demonstrate, if you may have heard me before, that the ancient Arabs are our people, right? That the ancient Arabs are our people. Okay, I'll show that as well. I'm going to show you that the ancient Arabs are our people, so there's no conflict in what Muhammad Ali is saying by taking the name Muhammad and Ali. Okay, only in the minds of people like David is there a problem with that. But it's funny, but notice how people like David, why don't you make an argument of the fact that black Americans shouldn't carry European names? David would, right? Because clearly those aren't the names. Now we know for sure that the names Wood, Lewis, Clay, Johnson, Jackson, we know for sure those are not our names. So what argument are you really making here, right? Because we know for sure that those are not the names of black people, right? Those are not our original names. People in Africa, where we come from, where our ancestors come from, they didn't have the names Jackson, Lewis, Wood, Clay, right? Like Malcolm said, Bunch, Johnson, Simpson, McMurphy, McDaniels, right? We didn't have none of those names. Those are not the names common to where we come from, right? So that's okay. That's okay for us to carry the names of the Europeans, but not the names of where our ancestors come from. And I'm going to show you that where our ancestors come from, they did have the names, Muhammad and Ali and such. And they weren't slave names either. I'm going to demonstrate that and prove that many of the African Muslims who had the names Ali and Muhammad and such, they were not slave. Those names were not slave names for many Africans on the continent of Africa, from the various African nations, Muslim African nations at that, who were free. They were independent. They weren't colonized. They weren't slaves. I'm going to show that as well to further prove that David Wood's argument is completely a failed argument.
We want to be called after names of our people.
What people would that be? Arab slave masters? Because
nothing, David. Because first of all, black Americans, we were not under Arab slavery. We weren't under Arab. So your argument that, oh, these are names of Arab slave masters is another asinine, fallacious argument. Black Americans were not under the slavery of Arabs. The Africans that were brought to the Americas from Africa, from the western coast of Africa, we weren't under Arab slavery, right? So if we choose the name to have Muhammad or Ali or Umar or whatever, those are not slave. We're not choosing slave master names because we were never under the Arabs as slave. Black Americans weren't under the Arabs as slave. So if a black American by his own choice or her choice chooses by themselves to take on the name Muhammad or Ali or Fatima, right? Or Aisha or Khadija, those are not slave names because they chose those names. And again, we were never under Arab slavery anyway, right? So what he tries to do when we watch the rest of the video is try to make some conflation behind the fact that yes, on the eastern coast of Africa, that yes, Arabs had been involved in trading, but they were involved in slave trading before Islam, right? They were involved in that before Islam. You see, so he tries to conflate that, well, Arabs were involved in slavery, therefore black Americans taking these names are taking Arab slave master names. But no, we weren't under Arab slavery. The Arabs were never the slave masters of the West Africans. So when we choose the names Muhammad and such, we're not taking Arab slave master names because Africans on the coast of West Africa, which is where the Americas got their slaves from, the majority of their slaves from, we weren't under Arab slavery. As we've talked about before, many of those Africans that were kidnapped, they were already Muslim by choice. They weren't Muslim because of occupation. They weren't Muslim because they had been colonized by Arabs. They weren't Muslim because they were subjugated and Arabs forced their religion and their names on them. No, these people had those names by choice. They were practicing Islam by choice, and I'm going to prove it. So this is a fallacious argument to say that, oh, you're leaving the European slave master name and taking on the Arab slave master name because the Africans on the west coast of Africa and in Central Africa were not towards the eastern parts of Africa and northern Africa and southern Africa, etc. They were not under any Arab occupation or any Arab subjugation or under any Arab slavery. You see? So this argument is a completely weak argument, and we'll destroy it as this video, as we continue to go on. But I want to make that point clear. So that's what he's trying to assert, that, oh, you know, he left the European slave master name to take on Arab slave names. But again, as I said, that's not the case, because we those of us who are in America, black Americans, right, and in the Americas, Central and South America, in the Caribbean, our ancestry doesn't come from a people who were enslaved by Arabs. That's not our history. So his argument is a BS argument. You see? So let's continue.
That's who Muhammad and his son-in-law Ali were, according to Muslim sources. And let's not forget that Arabs can exhibit a variety of shades and tones.
Right, exactly. The Arabs can indeed exhibit a variety of shades and tones. Plus, when we look at the type of slavery that the Arabs practice, history lets us know that the Arabs, unlike the white racist Christians like you and your families and your ancestors, David, the Arabs didn't practice a form of racial slavery where they just targeted, you know, a particular people of color or race of people, right? They didn't practice that type of slavery. The Arabs, we see, had they just had slavery. They had other Arabs as slaves. They had black people as slaves. There's even hadith that show they had Romans and Persians as slaves. And we know in history that they also had a sizable amount of white people as slaves. There was a sizable amount of white Europeans that had been captured as slaves from the Arabs. So, you know, these people try to make this connection to try to make it seem like the Arab slavery or the African slavery was somehow the same or the equivalent of the European Christian racist form of slavery, and it wasn't. Right? The Europeans had a particular form of slavery called chattel slavery, in which the person, and I'm not agreeing with slavery at all. I'm just pointing out the difference, that with the Arabs, it wasn't like that. Right? They had other Arabs as slaves. They had whites as slaves. They had blacks as slaves. So it wasn't based upon, well, you know, we only don't like those people, we only going to make them slaves. That's what the Europeans did. The European Christians, by the way, David, your people, right? They focused on race. They focused on looking down on blacks as less than human and deserving to be in such a position, right? Whereas that wasn't the case with the Arab slavery or the African form of slavery. So let us make that point clear. That we see there are hadiths that talk about Romans being slaves, that they had some Romans as slaves. They had other Arabs as slaves. Okay? So, you know, we want to cut that off right at the beginning. Cut that off right at the beginning. All right? So, So what he does from there is, I don't know, he shows some picture of some, you know, like a very light-skinned looking Arab or whatever. It really doesn't make any point. I mean, I can show pictures of dark-skinned Arabs, black-looking Arabs. It really is an irrelevant point. Here, this is the picture right here. He shows the picture of this brother right here. All right. So, and then from there, he goes into some hadiths that mention that the Prophet, you know, had a slave here or a slave there, or whatever the case may be, right? And he tries to make some argument about that. So, yes, there are a number of slaves. There's no evidence that talks about the Prophet having hundreds of slaves or thousands of slaves or anything of this case. Also, too, negating any time period on whether this was at the early stages of Islam or later stage, you know, because as we know, the Quran talks about the freeing of slaves. So regardless of this, we know that Muhammad is not, as he's trying to make it, a slave master, right? You know, like some kind of European, the equivalent of some kind of European slave master, because the book that the man Muhammad brings talks about the freeing of slaves, David. So why try to play this game, right? So, for example, let's see. Let me get the verse that talks about the freeing of slaves. Oops. The Quran in Surah 90 talks about the freeing of slaves. As it talks about what is like the uphill road, or the road towards that which is good. Right? In Surah 90 verses 12 and 13, we see here, Surah 90 verse 12 and 13, it says, "And what will explain to you the path that is steep, or the uphill road?" Right? This verses are about talking about, the path of righteousness. So in other words, what's that path? What will let you know what that road towards righteousness is? The next verse explains. So here we see the next verse. It is the freeing the bondman, or the setting free of a slave. So here we see, David, that here right in the Quran, the book that Muhammad brought, where you claim Muhammad is the slave master, so taking the name Muhammad would be taking the name of a slave master, we see actually it's not. So Muhammad Ali is right in taking the name Muhammad, because he's taking the name of a man who brings a book that says to do what, David? To free slaves. So he's actually not taking the name of a slave master. He's taking the name of a slave emancipator. A man who brings a book that actually tells him the road towards righteousness is what? Is freeing a slave. So sorry, Muhammad Ali was not deceived by Islam, and your little trick to make it seem like, oh, taking the name Muhammad is taking the name of a slave master. Wrong. Taking the name Muhammad is taking the name of an emancipator of slaves. As his book orders him and the believers who follow this book, that the road of the right path, the path of righteousness, it is what? It is freeing a slave. Right there, David. Everybody sees it. Chapter 90 of the Quran, verse 13, clearly says right there for everybody to see it. It is the freeing of a slave. Freeing of a slave is the path of righteousness. So no, if you take the name Muhammad, black people, black Americans, or black people anywhere in the world, you are not taking the name of a slave master. You are taking the name of a slave freer, a slave emancipator, as his book clearly tells him, free slaves. So people may say, well, what about the hadiths that talk about, that Muhammad had a slave here or there or whatever? Again, I don't know what time period that was. It doesn't really let us know. I would have to assume, based on what the Quran is saying, that perhaps those were in the early periods of Islam. Right? As you should know, the Quran was revealed over time. So perhaps those hadiths were at a time at the early stages of Islam. And then later, as the verses revealed, then the Prophet frees the slave. Because we see that hadiths talk about when the Prophet died, that he didn't have anything. He didn't have anything. He was, basically he died poor. He didn't die with a bunch of, stuff to leave his family, slaves and inheritance and all of that. So perhaps those hadiths were in the early period. I would have to say that they most likely are in the early period, when, before these things are revealed, and then, as we know, Allah reveals later to free slaves. And the Quran talks about freeing slaves for various reasons too. Freeing slaves for the expiation of a sin, or because of you violated an oath, or various other reasons. And as we see here, just free slaves for the goodness of it. Here it says just free slaves for the goodness. It's the path of righteousness to free slaves. So no, David, I repeat again, no, taking the name Muhammad is not taking the name of a slave master, because the Quran clearly, the book that Muhammad is said to bring from his Lord, tells him to free slaves as a good righteous deed. So that destroys the argument right there. So no, I'm sorry, taking the name Muhammad Ali is a great name to take, because you are taking the name of one who freed slaves, as his book clearly tells us. All right. So then from there, he then goes into this thing about, basically trying to make the prophet a white man now. We've heard this argument before too, right? From there, he goes into this thing about, making the prophet a white man. Let's listen. Let's see.
Burn.
Clay was a white man's name.
Sahih Muslim, number 6081. It was narrated that Abu Juhayfa said, I saw the messenger of Allah with a white complexion and some white hairs. What do you call 1,000,000 Muhammads jumping out of...
All right, so, but David, why don't you read all the hadiths though? How about this one right here, David? Boom, 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 boom. Allah's, and it's from Bukhari. Allah's apostle was neither very tall nor short, neither was he absolutely white. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. So wait a minute. How could he be white complexion when right here this hadith says that he was neither absolutely white nor deep brown? We got a problem here, everybody. We got a problem. We got a contradiction, of course, right? How could he be white? And then here it says, no, he wasn't absolutely white nor deep brown. Well, got an issue there, don't we? How is that possible that he could be, somebody say he's white in another, and then here it says, well, no, he was neither absolutely white nor deep brown. So I guess that would mean that he was somewhere in between, right? That would have to mean that he's somewhere in between complexions, yes? If he's not absolutely white, then the ones that keep saying that he's white and only mention white, well, they can't be right. And again, this is from Bukhari as well, right? This is from Bukhari. Same book you just read from, David. Here, it says that he's not absolutely white nor deep brown. Contradiction, right? Well, based on that, then you can't conclude that he was white. But wait a minute, perhaps we can find some other information that might be able to give us some clarity, right? Perhaps? Well, let's find out. Let's find out. Hold on a second here. Now, there's something interesting about this use of white in the Arabic language, right? Something interesting about the. Let me go to this right here. Yeah, there's something interesting. So let's take a look at some other hadiths before we go to that. Let's take a look at some other hadiths here to see about this. All right, hold on a second. I need to get this. I want to get this on there. Can I pull that up? Oh, okay, wait, no, that's not it. Second here. Bear with me a second. I may have to turn this into a picture file. Let's see. All right, yeah, let me do that. Hold on a second. I need to. Let's see. I'm gonna have to turn this into a picture file. So bear with me a second here, everybody, please. We're gonna look at some other hadiths that I have, and I have the references for them and all of that. So just bear with me a second. Okay, let's see. All right, let me pull that up real quick. Let's see. Okay, there we go. All right. Yes, exactly, Muzzy Buzz. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, I was gonna say. That's what I was gonna say. What you're saying there, and I'm gonna show that too, right? That in the language of the Arabs, using the term white doesn't mean like, you know, how people think in my, like, you know, when you hear the word white man today, which seems to be what David and all these people used, how they try to use it as if it's say. First of all, we would know that would be wrong anyway because Muhammad was not a European, right? He wasn't a European man. So when it says white man, it couldn't mean white man in the definition of how we understand white man today, that he would be European or whatever. We know geographically that's impossible because the prophet was, of course, he was, of course, from Arabia. So he couldn't have been a white man in the sense that people are trying to use it today. But you're right. What you just said is correct, and we're going to demonstrate that. All right. So here are some additional hadiths. Can you guys see that? Oh, it's taking too long. All right, so here's some additional hadiths that go along with this to show that, again, they're not saying that he was white. So I gave you the one from Bukhari already, Bukhari volume 4, number 748. Allah's apostle was neither very tall nor short, neither absolutely white nor deep brown. Okay, so that would be obviously somewhere in between the two. But here's another one. This one is from Al-Tirmidhi in Jami al-Sahih. That's volume 4, number 469. The hadith number is 1754. It says, the messenger of Allah was of medium stature, neither tall nor short, with a beautiful dark brown complexioned body. In the Arabic is Hassan al-Jism Asmar al-Laun. That's dark brown, beautiful dark brown, right? Or Hassan is like good dark brown complexion. All right. Here's another one where this is a hadith related, supposed to be what's this, from Ibn Sa'd's Kitab al-Tabakat al-Kabir, on the authority of Abdullah bin Abbas, where this person Yazid says he has a dream, right? He says he has a dream, and in the dream he says that he sees the prophet in the dream, right? Give you the context, because I only posted the part that's relevant here. But basically this is a hadith where this brother Yazid says he has a dream of the prophet, and then he describes it to Abdullah bin Abbas. And here's what he says about this particular part of the description of the prophet. He said, yes, I will describe him. He was a man between two men. His body and flesh were brown and blemish free with a sheen, right? Asmal ila al-bayad. Ibn Sa'd, that's the reference to Ibn Sa'd, Kitab al-Tabakat. You also have Ahmed bin Hanbal, the Musnad, al-Bahaki, Ibn Kathir. They all have this reference. Those are the references, as you see right there, to this narration where he's described as this brown, blemish-free, complexion here. All right. Here's another one, as you see here. A lot of people like to mention the hadiths where it might mention a certain part of the prophet's body, like his underarms, where they saw the whiteness of his underarms, or the whiteness of his foot or leg, or something of this sort, like here. But here's one, interestingly, that speaks of a part of his body that has being black looking, right? Ibn Sa'd reports on the authority of Al-Zubair, who reported on the authority of Ibrahim, the messenger of Allah stretched forth his left foot such that the blackness of its exposed part was visible. Okay. Here's another one from Sunan Abu Dawood. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, sat during prayers, he stretched forth his foot such that the blackness of foot was exposed. Sunan Abu Dawood, hadith number 962. Another one from from Al-Tirmidhi says here, it says the messenger, this was related on the authority of Anas bin Malik, says the messenger of Allah was neither tall such that he would stand out, nor was he short. He was not albino white, nor was he deep black, Adam, right? Nor was he deep black. So again, that's like the first one from Bukhari, showing that his complexion was somewhere in between. So he's not a white man, right? He's not a white man. Now, one of the brothers in the text pointed out something about this description of whiteness in the Arabic language, and he's correct. We do have something about that, right? We do have something about that. Let me pull that out. I gotta turn that into a picture as well. So let me pull that up. Okay, so we'll see about this use of white in the Arabic languages, right? When they spoke about something, what is this? What is this talking about? So let me pull that up for you. Oops, wrong one. Sorry about that. Hold on a second. Let's pull that up for. Oh, by the way, if you support my Patreon, I will add these notes to the Patreon as well, and then you can have access to these notes for yourself as I've done before. All right, so if you would like to have these notes that I'm sharing with you on the screen, you can, if you support my Patreon. If you already supported, then you'll have access to them once I load them. If you're not already a supporter on Patreon and you would like to be able to use and share these notes, if you join my Patreon and support my make a pledge to support me on Patreon, you can get access to these notes as well. Okay, all right. So here we go. So as I said, the brother in the comments, what's the brother's name? He mentioned brother Muzzy, Muzzy Buzz. He mentioned this, right? He mentioned this about the use, about the Arabs using white. And what does that mean, right? The brother Muzzy Buzz said, brother, white is very general in the Arabic in that hadith. Right, exactly. So here's what we have from some of the language sources about on this subject, as you see here, right? So it says here, Shams al-Din Abu Abdullah al-Dahabi in his Siyar Alam al-Nubala says, when Arabs say so and so is white, abiyad, they mean a golden brown complexion with a black appearance, right? Al-Hinti al-Lawn bi Hilya Suda, like the complexion of the people of India, brown and black, asmar wa adam, i.e. clear, refined blackness. You have another one here, says when Arabs say so and so, when so and so is abyad, they mean a wheatish complexion with slight darkness. Hinti alon bi hilyatin sauda. And if it is the complexion of the as if it is the complexion of the people of India, they say asmar and adam. And if it is of black people, sawad al taqrur, did I say that right? They say aswad. And likewise, everyone whose complexion is overwhelmingly black, they call aswad or shadid ul udma. And those are the sources there. All right. The same is said by al-Talabib in his Fiqh al-Lugha, as well as as-Suyuti in his Jawahir al-Uqud. Man, okay, that's a lot. But you see the sources there, all right? You see the sources there. We also have this from Ibn Manzur in his Lisan al-Arab. Is that 4, volume 4? I think is that volume 4 or section 4, 209 and 210. He notes, he says, the Arabs don't say a man is white or white man, Rajal Abiyad, due to a white complexion. This is what brother Muzzy Buzz was saying, right? The Arabs don't say a man is white or white man due to white complexion. Rather, whiteness with them means an external appearance that is free from blemish. When they mean a white complexion, they say red, ahmar. Now there is a slight difference. I want to make y'all clear on that there is a slight disagreement on that. Ibn Attab said in this statement of Shamir is a problem, for they do use abyad for complexions of the people and other things. But nonetheless, a lot of the sources say that when Arabs usually say white like this, they don't mean like, you know, white man, like white complexion, white man, right? Usually when they refer to that, they use ahmar, right? Red, like a reddish complexion. When they use it, and that usually was a reference to a white person, right? Ibn Athir, he disagrees. He's one of the people that disagrees with that. But as I showed you, more of the other references say that no, that's how the Arabs did. They usually didn't say somebody was a white man like that. They didn't mean it like, you know, like a white man in today's understanding of white man. Okay, so he says when the Arabs say so and so is abiyad or bayad, they only mean a noble character, al-karim fil akhlaq, not skin color. It is when they say so and so is red, ahmar or hamra, that they mean white skin, and the Arabs attribute white skin to the slaves. Red al-hamra refers to non-Arabs due to their fair complexion, which predominates among them. The Arabs used to say about the non-Arabs with whom white skin was characteristics, such as the Romans, Persians, and their neighbors. They are red skin. Al-hamra. Al-hamra means the Persians and Romans, and the Arabs attribute white skin to slaves. All right. So that can help us get a little reconciliation between what apparently seems to be conflicting hadiths. Some saying that he was a white man, some saying that he was not very white nor very dark, brown, right? So that can perhaps give us a little clarity on what seems to be a contradiction, in that, well, when they were saying white, they weren't contradicting the ones that says that he wasn't white, because this white description isn't referring to his literal actual skin color, which may make sense too, because sometimes, you know, it's weird that some of the hadiths would say that, you know, that they saw the whiteness of his armpit. Like, for example, if there's a white man, right, in today's understanding of a white man, if you see his armpits, you wouldn't make a distinction, because you would say, oh yeah, you know, right? It wouldn't be something that would stand out because his whole body looks like that, right? So if a white man today lifts up his arm and he has a tank top on, and you see his armpit, you wouldn't say, hey, I saw the whiteness of his armpit, because it wouldn't be something that would stand out, right? Because his whole body is white. Right? So you know what I mean? So it's interesting that those hadiths mentioned that they saw the whiteness of his armpit. If his whole body is white, then why would the whiteness of his armpit stand out? Right? That doesn't seem to logically make sense. If the man is completely white, that his armpit would be, that you would see the whiteness of his armpit when his whole body is allegedly white. It just doesn't follow. Luke, bro, I told you before, stop trying to interrupt my show with bringing up this stuff that's irrelevant to the topic, man. See, I try to, you know, I try to be nice to you, but you coming in and then you bringing up all this stuff that got nothing to do. So now I'm going to have to put you on snooze. So now your messages won't be seen because you're interrupting. I got a clear topic. You see I'm talking about something, and here you are typing stuff that got nothing to do with the subject. Right? You typing stuff that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Don't do that. All right, so so there we have it. Right? There we have it. There we have it. All right. So I show all this to say what? To show that the claims of David and these others who try to use these hadith wrongly to make it look like the prophet was a white man, literally a white man, are wrong or incorrect, because we have just as many others that show that he was not white. They say that he was not absolutely white, nor deep, nor dark brown or whatever, right? So obviously somewhere in between. Okay, so that's the purpose of to show this, that, you know, he's trying to, again, that's his game is to try to make it seem like, oh, Muhammad Ali, but Muhammad Ali did take a slave name of a white man and whatever the case may be. But as we can see from the evidence, no, Prophet Muhammad was not a white man. Okay, he was not a white European man, a white Caucasian man. Here's another thing that's interesting too, that because David basically in this video he tries to assert some kind of racism to the prophet, right? He tries to assert some type of racism to the prophet, you know, by saying the prophet, you know, making these lame arguments, about the prophet and certain interactions with black people that are fallacious and false, right? Very, very fallacious and false. As I've shown in my other video where I show that the prophet took special care to pray for a black woman, right? I showed in my other video. Where's the video? Matter of fact, this video right here. Where is it? If anybody's interested, this video right here, right, refuting the claims that that Muhammad was racist, that said racist things about black people, right? So I've shown in this video, if you want to take a look at it, where I address these claims and refute them, right? Claiming these claims that the Prophet supposedly, was racist. I showed that there's hadith that showed that the Prophet, prayed over when a black woman had died, right? And the Prophet actually was upset that the people didn't tell him. So when they told him, he took time out to go and pray for this black woman. He went to pray for her. So that's to show how he felt about her. Then there's another one where he talks about Bilal and how Bilal was he talks about how he said he heard Bilal's footsteps ahead of him, right? How he talked about how he heard Bilal's footsteps ahead of him, and of course Bilal was a black person. So these claims are just they just don't stand up. They're just fallacious claims, and they're not going to stand up to to the evidence. All right, they just won't do that. So let me continue on here. Where what is David going further to say? Let's see. So like I said, he from there he just posts all these hadiths that, like I said, saying that the Prophet had white skin, was white. And then he posts, as I mentioned, where he shows these hadiths where the Prophet had a black slave here or a black slave there. Right? Here he makes this argument about, you guys see that on the screen. Like here, he brought this hadith here where he talks about how the Prophet, a slave came and gave his pledge to the Messenger of Allah to immigrate to the Prophet, and the Prophet did not realize that this person was a slave. So that the master came looking for him, and then the Prophet said, "Sell him to me." So he bought him for 2 black slaves. Then he did not accept the pledge of anyone after that until he asked if he was a slave. So David tries to make some lame argument, about this. First of all, he tried to make an argument about that the Prophet traded 2 black slaves for the one, and trying to make it like a racist thing. What he ignores is that it wasn't about that because first of all, you don't even know if the other slave was black or not. But he tries to make it seem like, oh, well, look, Muhammad was racist because one other slave was worth 2 black slaves. No, what you're missing, David, is that here, this other slave was a Muslim. So in other words, the Muslim is worth more than the unbelievers. So he traded these two who were unbelievers, not because they were black. It was because they were 2 unbelievers. So he said, look, I'd be willing to give 2 unbelievers for this one believer, this one slave who's a believer. We can see the same thing in the story of Bilal. As a matter of fact, when Abu Bakr, let me let you see that one. When they freed Abu Bakr, right? We can see this same thinking that it's not about the color, right? It's about that, you're freeing a Muslim. So the Muslim is worth more than an unbeliever. That's what this is about, not the color, as David tries to make it out to be. All right, so let me give you that one. In the story of Abu Bakr, when he frees Bilal. Let's see here. All right, so here we go. Right here, you see in this story of Asura al-Nabawiyah by Ibn Hisham. Here it speaks about. Wait a minute, Spawn. That's the wrong one. Wait, that's one of the ones. But wait, let me get the story. Where's that at? Here it is. I think this is it right here. Yeah. Here we go. Here it is right here. All right, so yeah, here we go right here in the story of Bilal. When Abu Bakr had freed Bilal, Here we see that same thinking that, look, they're willing to give whatever it takes to free a fellow Muslim slave. It had nothing to do with because he's black or whatever, that he gave 2 blacks for 1 slave. It was the fact that, look, he's willing to give whatever to free a fellow Muslim, right? That's what it was about. Not that they were black, but that they were unbelievers, and he's trying to free a believing slave, a slave that believes. So here we see when Bilal was freed, what does it say here, right? In the story of Bilal, you see where my cursor's at here. It says that, where is it? Oh yeah, right here, this part right here. So when they were torturing Bilal and Abu Bakr passed by to free him, right? It says he came upon the open field where Bilal was being tortured for amusement. Abu Bakr did not lose his temper, for that was not his way, but he remonstrated with the torturers. He said to Umayyah, "Have you no fear of God that you treat this poor man like this?" He replied, saying, "You are the one who corrupted him, so you save him from his plight." Abu Bakr replied, Then sell him to me, name your price." Umayyah was a businessman and could not give up making a profit, so he sold Bilal for a good price. To humiliate Bilal, he added, "I would have sold him to you even if you offered me only 1 ounce of gold." Abu Bakr answered, "I would have bought him even if you asked for 100 ounces of gold." So as you can see here, it's not that the Prophet looked down on these 2 black slaves and that he was going to trade the 2 black slaves for the other slave. It was that he sees the believer as worthy of whatever it takes. So if I got to give up 2 slaves to free this believing Muslim slave, then so be it. But David, of course, in his negative, attempts to demonize Islam, it always has to be made negative, right? It always has to have some sinister meaning or motivation behind it. So he gives us this fake, claim that, oh, it was because they were black. So 2 black people are worth 1 white. Again, it doesn't even say the color of the other slave, but that's what he's trying to import as the idea. But as you can see, we know Bilal was black. And for this black slave, Abu Bakr said, "Look, whatever you would have wanted, I would have gave it to free this man, this Muslim, because he's a Muslim, not because he's black." You see? So again, David's claims are just lame and easily refutable. All right, easily refutable here. So basically, that's what he goes on here. The rest of what he shows here is all, oh, here's a hadith with a black slave, with a black this, and that's basically what he's trying to go on there. And then, like I said, in the rest of the video, he's trying to make this argument about, like I said, trying to make it seem like Muhammad Ali taking the name Muhammad Ali is taking the name of some Arabs, some white Arabs or something of this sort. But let's get into that. Let's talk about that. Okay, let's talk about that, and we're gonna talk about the Prophet's family members and things of this sort as well. Now, here is an excerpt from the book, The Sealed Nectar. Right, many people are familiar with that book, The Sealed Nectar, and here's a section where it talks about the genealogy of the Prophet, right? So here it talks about his grandfather and the children that his grandfather had. So I want you to focus on this section right here. I'm going to highlight it. All right. So here, right there, that section right there. So Abdul Muttalib is the grandfather of the Prophet, right? So here it says he had 10 sons. Al-Harith, Al-Zubair, Abu Talib, Abdullah. Abdullah, as you know, is the Prophet's father. He had Hamza, Abu Lahab, how you say this, Gidak, and Makwam, Safar, and Al-Abbas, right? And then it says he also had 6 daughters. Now, again, this is supposed to be the Prophet's family, right, from his grandfather. So he says his grandfather also had 6 daughters who were al-Hakim. I notice here, the only white one. So why are they pointing out that this is the only white one from amongst his children? Okay, so this is a point to show you that even in the Prophet's family, it is said that members of his family were black, right? I'm going to show you that as well. Right? They were amongst the black Arabs. So notice here, even in the nectar, the sealed nectar, which is the biography of the Prophet, it speaks that from his grandfather's progeny, from his grandfather's children, he only has one white child, and this is al-Hakim. It says right there, you see it, she's the only white one. So that means what? The rest of them are what? And we also have proof of this from Al-Jahiz, right? This coincides with what Al-Jahiz says, right? Al-Jahiz is a famous, Muslim. He's like an historian. He's a scientist from the past, and in his book, he talks about this as well. Where's that at? Let me get that for you. Where's that at? What did I do with that? Hold on a second. Bear with me. That's about Bilal. Is that one? Hold on a second. Let me pull that up for you real quick. Oh, here we go, right here. Yeah, there it is, right there. All right. So this is from Al-Jahiz's book, Al-Faqar al-Sudan, Min al-Abiyad, right? The Pride of Blacks Over the Whites. This is an actual book by Al-Jahiz, very well-known Muslim historian, scientist of the past. And take note that nobody refutes him. Nobody says that Al-Jahiz was a liar. No one says that he's weak, that he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's very well respected throughout Islamic history and amongst the scholars and such. Okay, and so this coincides with what I just read, right? What I just read about from the sealed nectar, that the only white child that was from Prophet Muhammad's grandfather was the one daughter, Al-Hakim. They point out that she was the only white one. So that would have to mean, obviously, that the rest of the children were not such, including the Prophet's father, Abdullah. And as I said, this corroborates with what Al-Jahiz says in his book. Let me get to that point. That is, where is it? Here we go, right here. Yes. I want you guys to follow along. Can you guys see this? So I'm going to highlight it right here. So here, this coincides with what Al-Jahiz says in his historical writings about the family of the Prophet. Here's what he says here. He says the 10 sons, as you just mentioned, as you just saw from the sealed nectar, it talked about, I just read to you the 10 sons and the 10 sons and the 6 daughters, or 10 daughters, I forgot, what was it? Right? But again, from the sons, he had 10 sons, as you just read from the sealed nectar. Here, Al-Jahiz also mentions the 10 sons, and look what he says. Right? In the sealed nectar, it mentioned that he only had the one white child, which was his daughter, Al-Hakim. She was the only white one. But here, we see Al-Jahiz says the 10 sons of Abdul al-Muttalib, the grandfather of Muhammad, were all black and strong. Right? They were all black and strong. The Amr ibn al-Tufail said that the Kaaba was well guarded when he saw them on black camels going around the Kaaba. And it added that Ibn Abbas was black and very tall. Those of Abu Talib's family, who are the most noble of the men, are more or less black. So we got ample evidence that Muhammad wasn't a racist, that members of his own family were spoken of and said to be black. So, the claim's just not going to fly, David. I'm sorry. The claims are just not going to fly. So I repeat again, so Muhammad Ali, when he took the name Muhammad Ali, he was not taking the name of a white Arab slave master. He's not taking the name of some other people, because as we can show you here, clearly the ancient Arabs were the people of Muhammad Ali. They are our people, right? And let's go into that. Let's make that case. Okay, let's go into that. So here are some reference sources that talk about how the ancient Arabs viewed themselves and their color, right? Here, as you can see here, where my cursor's at, right? We have Ibn Manur. It says, author of the most authoritative classical Arabic lexicon, Lisan al-Arab, notes the opinion that the phrase Aswad al-Jilda, black-skinned, idiomatically meant Khali al-Arab, meaning the pure Arabs, because the color of most of the Arabs is dark, al-Udma. In other words, darkness of skin among the Arabs suggested purity. The Syrian scholar and historian al-Dahabi too reported that Abdullah ibn Abbas, the Prophet Muhammad's first cousin, and his son Ali ibn Abdullah were very, very dark skinned. That's al-Dahabi. CR, I guess, is that number 5, volume 5, perhaps 253. So here we see that we have sources that show us that the ancient Arabs, having dark skin was a source of pride for them, right? It was a source of pride for them. It wasn't something that they were ashamed of or that they looked down upon or whatever the case. In fact, that was considered the Khali al-Arab, the pure Arabs were the ones who were, the dark-skinned ones or the black-skinned ones. So in that sense, then Muhammad Ali is correct. He did name himself after his people, right? So I'm sorry, David, but oh well, too bad, right? Too bad. And what about Ali? What about Ali? Because that's the second name of Muhammad Ali's name, Ali, right? And again, David's assertion is that Muhammad Ali took the name of some white Arabs, supposedly thinking that those are his people, but he didn't. The people are white Arabs, right? Well, here again we have this source here, Suyai, is that Suyai? In Tariq al-Khulafa, says Ali ibn Abu Talib, the first cousin of the Prophet and future fourth Caliph, is described by al-Suyuti and others as husky, bald, pot-bellied, or large bearded, and jet black. Shadid al-Udma. So there's although today people try to cover these things up and they try to hide it, or they try to always give these references about the Prophet was a white man, or they saw the whiteness of his underarms and all that. If you do the research, you will find that there are things that are either being hidden from us or that are not spoken of, or they're not spoken of, but the information is out there. The information is out there, and these are reputable sources too, right? These are reputable sources that I'm referencing here as well. So anybody has any question, these are reputable sources. So, and again, David, if these things are correct, which I believe they are, then no, Muhammad Ali did not choose the name of another slave master, an Arab white slave master. That's not the case, right? So let's go further on into that as well, because I'm going to show you that we have even Africans after the time of the Prophet and such, who had these same names, had these names Ali, had these names Muhammad, and they were not slaves, right? They were not slaves, right? They weren't slaves. So, for example, we have Sunni Ali. All right, we got Sunni Ali. And let me give you the next one. And the other one was a brother by the name of Askia Muhammad. All right, we have Askia Muhammad. These are black African Muslim kings. They weren't slaves. So we're gonna destroy the argument that when a black American takes on these Muslim names, that they're taking on Arab slave master names. We're gonna destroy that. All right. Let's see. Let me give you one more. We got Mansa Musa, another one. All right. Let's see. Where's Mansa Musa? There we go, Mansa Musa. And here's Mansa Musa, right? Okay. All right, so let's go back to Sunni Ali. So first, let's talk about Sunni Ali. All right, here is Sunni Ali. He was a Muslim ruler, Muslim king. He ruled over Mali and Songhai, right? It says here that he controlled the gold trade. He ruled ruler of Songhai. He worked to unify, strengthen, and enlarge the land. He took over Timbuktu and Jenin. He brought stability and peace to Songhai, and he was religiously tolerant. He was religiously tolerant. And so, look, he has the name Ali, Sunni Ali. He was not a slave. He was not a slave of the Arabs. The Arabs didn't control his part of Africa. He wasn't under colonialist Arab rule. He wasn't forced to be a Muslim. None of those claims apply. Right? And his name was Ali. So once again, Muhammad Ali taking the name Ali is not taking the name of a slave master. Because free Muslim, free black African Muslims, who these people would be our descendants, right? These people here would be the descendants of the black Americans. So if I take the name Ali, I'm not taking the name of an Arab slave master, because we have evidence that my free African slave my free African descendants carried the name Ali, and he wasn't a slave. So if that name is passed on to a black American, he's not taking the name of a slave, because we have evidence that our free African ancestors, who were kings and rulers of empires, carried these names, and they didn't get it from being slaves either. Sonny Ali didn't get that name from being a slave of Arabs. So that refutes that, David. Let's go to the next one. Here is Askia Muhammad. He was also a Muslim ruler, king. His name was, he carries the name Muhammad. He didn't get the name Muhammad because he was a slave. He didn't get the name Muhammad because the Arabs had colonized his people and conquered them and subjugated them and made them take the names of their masters. No, he had the name free of choice because they were already African Muslims, black African Muslims already. So taking the name Muhammad, and again, these people who I'm mentioning, they were in West and Central Africa. So they weren't slaves. There's no history that says that Askia Muhammad or Sonny Ali were slaves, nor their people. So when they had these names free of choice as Muslims. So having the name Muhammad or Ali is not taking the name of a slave master, because your free ruling ancestors had these names. So as you see, Askia Muhammad was said to improve the system of government. He strengthened Islam in his territories and nation, and he encouraged Islamic scholarship. Yes, Askia Muhammad is very prominent for that he encouraged Islamic scholarship and learning Islam and such. All right. And one more, we have Mansa Musa. As you see in the background behind him is a picture of the Timbuktu Mosque. Very, very famous, mosque there in Timbuktu, Africa. And this, of course, is there because of their relationship to Islam. Once again, they were not slaves either. They had not been conquered by the Arabs. They had not been colonized by the Arabs. Islam was not forced on them by the Arabs. They were Muslims, free by their own choice, just like the other kings that I mentioned. So they have these names, and they are names that they are not slave names. They are names of these free African kings and rulers. And Mansa Musa was a very, very prominent one. They said he was the richest man in the world, even to this day, right? They say he was one of the richest men in the world, even for his time period. He had so much wealth and gold, and his kingdom was so vast and large that, no Europeans could touch him. No Europeans could touch him. And by the way, let this be connected into Black History Month, since, they always like to make it seem like Africa was a bunch of jungle people running around with bones in their noses, when these men, these African kings, who were Muslims, prove that that's a lie, that they tell you that Africans were a bunch of people running around in the jungle with spears and gun and bones in the nose, half naked. That's not all of Africa, right? There were indeed empires and kingdoms of Africa. And alhamdulillah, they were Muslim. Right? They were Muslim. So here Mansa Musa says he expanded Mali's borders to the north and towards the Atlantic. He made sure that peace was kept within his kingdom. He converted to Islam and adopted the Muslim justice system. However, it says, but he promoted religious tolerance and did not impose his religion on his subjects. But most of the people in those nations were Muslim, or in his nation, his kingdom, were Muslim until this day. This is why today Timbuktu is still predominantly, if not all, Muslim, because they kept it from their ancestors, and they were not slaves. It had not been forced on them. All right. So these are the proofs to show that David's claim is wrong, and Muhammad Ali was not deceived by Islam. He was right on when he became a Muslim, and he was right on when he spoke out against the racism of the Christians here in America. He was right on in all that he said when he spoke against the Vietnam War, and he refused to go and fight for these racist people. Right. He was right on about that. He was not deceived. He was right on. He was correct. So sorry, David. No. So the answer to the question, was Muhammad Ali deceived by Islam? Definitely not. Definitely not. And when he changed his name, he chose great names, names that his ancestors carried, that were not given to them by slaves, nor forced on them by some Arab invaders or conquerors or enslavers, etc. And as even with the Prophet Muhammad, we see that the book that he brings, the Quran, clearly says to free slaves. Right? Can't get around that. The book clearly says to free slaves as a righteous deed for the expiation of sins, or just for the goodness of the act of freeing a slave. All right? So the evidence is ample there that David is completely wrong in this regard. All right? So with that, we'll go ahead and close it out, showing that David was wrong, and the answer is clear. Muhammad Ali was not deceived by Islam. He made the right choice in becoming a Muslim, as Islam, as I've shown you, was the religion of his ancestors. He's right. When he chose the name Muhammad Ali, that is the name of his people. That is the name that his people had, as history demonstrates from these prominent African rulers. Okay? So with that, we'll close it out. Remember, again, to support the channel. Utilize the links in the description of the video. Don't forget to like the video as well. Even if you watch this later, don't forget to add your likes. And again, we appreciate your support. Utilize those links, the Cash App, or become a patron. And again, as I said, if you become a patron and you want access to the notes that I used in this video, you can get them by becoming a Patreon follower. So if you support me on Patreon, you'll have access to those notes, and you can use them for yourself in your own debates and discussions with others as well. All right? So we'll end it on that. Assalamu alaikum.